Lesson 12 Sunan Abū Dāwud. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma akhrijna min zulumatil wahm wa akrimna binuril fahm. Allahumma aftah alayna abwaba rahmatik wanshur alayna khazaina ulumik birahmatika ya arhamar rahimin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Welcome to Lesson 12, Sunan Abū Dawud of Module 2 History of Hadith compilations of the course on Hadith. In the previous lesson about Sahih Muslim, we have learned that next to Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim by Muslim ibn Hajjaj and Naysaburi is the second most reliable collection of Hadith by the Ahlus Sunnah. Muslim has collected out of 30,000 narrations or ahadith and compiled it for a period of 15 years. He presented it to prominent hadith scholars like Abu Zar'a al-Razi. Containing 7,275 traditions, Sahih Muslim has been admired by all Sunni muhaddithun, preferring it to Sahih al-Bukhari on account of wholesome arrangement, the citation of channels or turuq, and the variety of the chain of transmitters or sanad and text. Transmitters or sanad and text or matan of the traditions. Some have even regarded it as absolutely more prominent than Sahih al-Bukhari. Muslim identified refinement of narration, separation of the pure from the adulterated, and presentation of a systematic hadith treatise in terms of the citation of channels or turuq and chains of transmitters or asnad, and the absence of the repetition approach in it as his motives behind compiling this book. Apart from the acknowledgement of Muslim himself that not all the traditions contained in his book are authentic or sahih, some hadith scholars have even doubted the veracity of all traditions in Sahih Muslim. Better known as Sharh al-Nawawi, Al-Manhaj fi Sharh Sahih Muslim ibn Hajjaj by Nawawi, is considered the most important and most comprehensive commentary or sharh on Sahih Muslim. Better known as Abu Dawud, Salmān ibn Ash ibn Shadād ibn Āmir ibn Āmir was born in Sijistan near Sand and west of the city of Herat, the land of dates and sand. In order to learn hadith, he traveled to then hadith centers such as Khurasan, Makkah, Kufa, Halab, Harran, Damascus, Baghdad, etc. He heard traditions in Makkah from Qa'tibi Sulaiman ibn Harf and Muslim ibn Ibrahim, in Kufa from Hasan ibn Rabi' and Ahmad ibn Yunus, in Halab from Rabi' ibn Nafi', in Harran from Abu Ja'far Nufayli and Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib, in Damascus from Safwan ibn Salih and Hashim ibn Ammar, in Khurasan from Ishaq ibn Rahuya or Rahuya, in Baghdad from Ahmad ibn Hanbal, in Balkh from Qutayba ibn Sa'id, in Egypt from Ahmad ibn Salih, etc. It is said that Ishaq ibn Rahuya, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Ali ibn Madini, and Yahya ibn Mu'in had the greatest role in his training and education. Quoting the son of Abu Dawud, Hakim has thus stated, "I was familiar with many of the muhaddithun. There was no one who had memorized and more familiar with traditions than Ibn Mu'in did, and there was no one whose knowledge and awareness of the jurisprudence of hadith or fiqh al-hadith could surpass Ahmad ibn Hanbal. No one could overtake Ali ibn Madini on the circumstances of hadith or ilalul hadith, and I found out that Ishaq ibn Rahuya, notwithstanding his memorization and knowledge of hadith, gave precedence to Ahmad ibn Hanbal over himself, recognizing his intellectual standing." From among Abu Dawud's narrators and students, some are famous Sunni Hadith authorities, such as Abu Isa at-Tirmidhi, compiler of Sunan at-Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, compiler of Sunan Nasa'i, Abu Awana Isfaraini, Ahmad ibn Ibrahim ibn Ashnani, Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Hassan al-Basri, Abu Sa'id ibn Arabi, etc. Sunni scholars and luminaries have mentioned Abu Dawud with words of praise. For example, Musa ibn Harun says, Abu Dawud has been created in the world for the sake of Hadith. Ibn Habban also writes regarding him, Abu Dawud is one of the Imams in the world in the fields of jurisprudence, knowledge, preservation of Hadith, and acts of worship. He collected traditions and defended the Sunnah. Similarly, Abu Abdullah Hakim al-Naysaburi has said regarding his personality, during his time, Abu Dawud is indisputably the Imam in the field of Hadith. In this regard, Ibn Ishaq as-Saghani also believes that Hadith has become soft to Abu Dawud, just as iron had become soft for Prophet Dawud alayhi salam. Elsewhere, Ibn Ishaq as-Saghani and Ibrahim al-Harbi are also reported to have said, as Abu Dawud wrote the book Sunan, Hadith became soft for him, just as iron became soft for Prophet Dawud alayhi salam. Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Yasin says, Abu Dawud is one of the protectors of the Hadith of the Messenger of Allah and learned of the science of Hadith, its flows and chain of transmission, and he used to engage in worship a lot. In addition to Hadith, Abu Dawud was also highly learned in jurisprudence, and one of his motives in writing his Sunan is to give way to the jurisprudence or fuqahā to benefit from jurisprudential traditions. In this regard, Al-Dhahabi says, along with his predecessors in Hadith and its sciences, Abu Dawud is considered one of the great fuqahā, and his treatise, that is the Sunan, is the evidence for this claim. He was one of the elect companions of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He attended his classes for some time and minutely asked from him primary as well as secondary questions. Finally, Abu Dawud passed away in 275 after Hijrah in Basra. Other works. In addition to the Sunan, Abu Dawud wrote 12 other books, some of which are the following. Al-Masā'ilu allati khalif alayha al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Kitabul Marasil, Kitab fir Rijal, and Kitabul Qadr. From among the 6 Ṣahīḥs, Sunan Abu Dawud is considered the third in terms of credibility and has been recognized and accepted by the Sunnah scholars and Muhaddithun. Abu Dawud intended to collect traditions that might be useful for the fuqahā in their inferences and reasoning. For this reason, his book focuses on collecting jurisprudential traditions, and it is said that he is the first person to have compiled a book on Sunan instead of a Musnad or Jami'. Abu Bakr ibn Dasa, a narrator of Sunan, narrated Abu Dawud as saying, I collected 500,000 traditions of the Messenger of Allah, and out of them I selected 4,800 traditions in which I included Sahih and approximately Sahih traditions. Similarly, Ibn Dasa quoted Abu Dawud as saying, in the Sunan I included both Sahih and approximately Sahih traditions, and if ever there is any weakness or flaw in it, I have explained it. And it is narrated that after the compilation, he presented his book to his teacher Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who accepted and considered it good. In a letter addressed to the people of Mecca, Abu Dawud has enumerated the following salient features of his book. 1. In case of two Sahih traditions, I have narrated the one whose narrator was ahead in memorizing it. 2. There are only few traditions in the sections or abwab in order to maintain brevity. 3. Whenever necessary, I have restituted the tradition. 4. Traditions have been narrated concisely. Number 5. I have also argued with transmitters. 6. Sunan traditions are explored. 7. I have stated the weakness of tradition. And 8. I have not narrated a tradition from a person whose tradition is not accepted, matrukul hadith. Many narrators have narrated traditions in Sunan Abū Dāwud, and as acknowledged with Ibn Kathir, their narrations differ with one another. Among them, the narrations of the following four persons are most famous. Abu Bakr ibn Muhammad ibn Bakr, known as Ibn Dasa; Abu Sa'id Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Ziyad, known as Ibn Arabi; Abu Ali Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Amr Lu'lu'i al-Basri; and Abu Isa Ishaq ibn Musa ibn Sa'id Ramli. Among these narrations, those of Ibn Dasa are most complete, followed by those of Ramli and then those of Lu'lu'i. Shah Abdul Aziz Dehlawi says, the narrations of Lu'lu'i are more popular in the East and those of Ibn Dasa in the West, and both their narrations are very similar, and their difference is more or less only precedence in recording. In contrast, the narrations of Ibn Arabi, in comparison to them, have obvious flaws. As quoted by Suyuti on the basis of narration of Abu Bakr ibn Dasa, Sunan Abū Dawud has 4,800 traditions, but in recent printings, the book includes 5,274 traditions. As stated in the introduction to Aini's commentary, 16 commentaries and annotations on Sunan Abū Dawud have been written. In the introduction to the Sunan, the names of these books are mentioned. Some of them are called commentary or sharh and annotation or ta'liq, while others are described as marginal notes or hashia and summarization or talkhis. Sharh Sunan Abū Dawud by Badruddin Aini, Mirqatus Su'ad ila Sunan Abi Dawud by Suyuti, and Sharh Sahar Nafurdi by Nafurdi are considered among the most important commentaries and annotations on Sunan Abū Dawud. As viewed by all Sunni scholars, Sunan Abū Dawud is the third and most reliable and authentic collection of hadith after Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And this shows their attention to the academic status of the compiler and the book's credibility. We shall quote here the statements of a number of Sunni scholars regarding the book. Hafiz Abu Bakr Khatib says, Sunan Abū Dawud is a noble book, the like of which is not written on religious science. And this book has been accepted by all people and all groups of fuqahā, notwithstanding their different schools of thought or madhahib. And the people of Iraq, Egypt, Maghrib, and many cities of the Muslim world rely on it. Before Abu Dawud, the ulama used to compile hadith collections or jawami, musnads and the like, in which news, stories, admonitions, and manners are included along with traditions and laws. But before Abu Dawud, there was no one who had collected a book of Hadith, exclusively Sunan, which includes all pertinent narrations. For this reason, the Sunan was admired and appreciated by Hadith authorities and authors. By the way, when we talk about Maghrib, we are referring to a region in North Africa bordering the Mediterranean Sea, and it comprises the coastal plains of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and often Egypt. And when we say Sunan, we are referring to a work of traditions that is mainly to do with matters of jurisprudence that a Muslim encounters in everyday life. Ibn Arabi, one of the Sunan's narrators and students of Abu Dawud, thus says, if in acquiring knowledge a person has no book other than the Quran and the book of Abu Dawud, then he will not be in need of anything else. After quoting the statement of Ibn Arabi, Khattabi thus says, by way of defending it, Abu Dawud unprecedentedly collected in his book traditions on the principles of knowledge, fundamentals of Sunan, and rules of jurisprudence. An-Nawawi believes that anyone who is preoccupied with jurisprudence and the like must thoroughly study the book Sunan Abū Dāwud, because most of the traditions and laws he will need can be found there. Moreover, access to these traditions in this book is easy, and the traditions are mentioned in concise form. The author had a particular intellectual taste of embellishing the narrations. Hakim an-Naysaburi thus says, on the authority of Muhammad ibn Makhlad, Zubair ibn Abdullah ibn Musa is reported to have said, Abu Dawud learned 100,000 traditions, and when he wrote the Sunan and presented it to the people, his book became like the Quran for the proponents of Hadith, in abiding by it and expressing no opposition to it. And all his contemporaries followed his footsteps. Hafiz Zakaria Saji has stated, the book of Allah is the essence of Islam, while the book of Abu Dawud is the covenant of Islam. Perhaps what Saji means is that Sunan Abu Dawud contains Islamic laws, and acting upon them is like concluding a pact with Islam. From these statements, some of which seem exaggerated, the following points can be deduced. 1. Abu Dawud is the first person to have collected a special hadith book on religious laws. Thus, his book is called Sunan and not Jami'. Number 2, jurisprudential traditions are presented in summary and have some modifications in the text and chain of transmission. Number 4, Abu Dawud's book is acceptable to all Sunni Hadith scholars and schools of jurisprudence, or madhahib, although it contains jurisprudential traditions usually favorable to a specific inclination. Key points. Among the Ṣiḥāḥ Sittah, or six Ṣahīḥs, or Sunnī Six Major Collections of Hadith, Sunan Abu Dawud by Salmān ibn Ash, Ibn Shadād, Ibn Āmir, Ibn Āmir, is considered the third most reliable collection of Sunni Hadith. Traditions needed by jurists or fuqahā are collected therein, and it contains 5,274 traditions, which are transmitted according to the narrations of Ibn Wāsih. In his letter to the people of Makkah, Abu Dawud emphasized that he explained in his Sunan the abuse of traditions, and that he has not recorded any tradition narrated by individuals whose narrations are left or rejected, or what we call as matrukul hadith. Apart from admiring Abu Dawud, many Sunni Hadith scholars have considered him pioneer in collecting traditions or Sunan and jurisprudential narrations which are acceptable to all Sunni schools of jurisprudence. According to the explanation of Abu Dawud, the narrations in Sunan have been selected from 500,000 narrations or a hadith. Next lesson, we will deal with Sunan Tirmidhi, inshallah. For more similar lessons, subscribe to Wayfaring with Mansoor channel. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.